Hello everybody, welcome to StraightA. Dawson here, back with the final free agent predictions video. I may do like a trades prediction or something, here in the next couple days or something, but who knows. I am doing the wide receivers and defensive linemen that are left in the free agent pool, basically, of predictions, and just big notable people as well. But before we get started, please leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and comment any suggestions for the videos moving forward. But without further ado, guys, let's get right into the video. This is one of the big videos because there's a lot of wide receivers on the market that could go potentially in a lot of different places. A lot of wide receiver 1 potentials, wide receiver 2 potentials, wide receiver 3 potentials, or just, backups in general. Defensive linemen, also, there's a couple of them that I want to make a note of, but just like with the other defensive players, I'm not as knowledgeable with them, but there's still a couple that I want to talk about and kind of get my opinion on. But I think this is kind of fascinating. You're going to see a lot of names not pop up. Most of the guys I kind of put or possible wide receiver 1 potentials, I didn't really, count like Kendrick Bourne or Cedric Wilson, people like that. I just didn't deem it. I'll kind of talk a little bit about them, but otherwise, anybody can pick up a wide receiver. It's like not a lower tier wide receiver necessarily, but a not as high value type wide receiver for wide receiver 3 or bench position type players. So I just kind of picked out the notable ones, but I still have quite a few, starting with Mike Evans. And I love Mike Evans. Mike Evans is great, and I think he's going to do great potential, but I think he loves Tampa Bay. But there's potential. I'm buying into the rumors that he might actually go to Kansas City. A lot of people are kind of speculating, like, oh, could he go to Kansas City? Kansas City needs a veteran wide receiver there. Mike Evans is reliable. He's probably going to get a decent bag. He wants to probably win a championship again. There's a lot of different things that you could potentially talk about there, but I still think I'm very confident about him staying in Tampa Bay. I'm not too worried about his position there, so I'm saying Tampa Bay is my definite prediction, but I'm kind of buying into the Kansas City rumors, even though I don't really love it. Granted, there's a lot of rumors with Kansas City and the many wide receivers they can get, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. We got Odell Beckham Jr. I think it's kind of a written, done case. I'm putting the Ravens as my number 1 choice, number 2 choice, number 3 choice, all the way down to number 9. I'll put my number 10 choice at Indianapolis, though. Just the places that want Odell and places he would want to go are not very common. Indianapolis might seem like a good enough place, very similar play style to what Lamar and all them in Baltimore cooking up. A very good potential franchise, very good system, very good just overall quality team. I feel like they would want to go, and Indianapolis would consider bringing him, but I still think Baltimore by a long shot. T. Higgins, T. Higgins, of course, is on that franchise tag currently, so he could be traded, and he may be in a different conversation for a different day. And a lot of people do think he's going to be traded or going away somewhere. I genuinely don't see it. I think the Bengals see that they have an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl this year. Joe Burrow stays healthy, maybe draft good, pick up a couple other free agents, keep them on a 1-year deal. Granted, it kills your cap room, but you kind of want 2 good receivers. I don't think you can really bring in another good receiver in this draft right now, or not in this draft, but in this free agency. But if he does go somewhere, I think that the New York Jets specifically, would love to take him. Aaron Rodgers loves T. Higgins, or loves a T. Higgins type receiver, and you kind of need somebody who's there, who's reliable. And New York Jets would love to have him, I think. But I still think that the Bengals are pretty confident. So far, the number 1 choice is kind of my only choice for a lot of these guys, with a kind of a secondary second pick to kind of talk about. But Tyler Boyd is a different conversation. I included him just because I like Tyler Boyd. He's a probable wide receiver 3 in any place he goes, maybe a couple wide receiver 2 locations. But I don't know exactly where he goes. He's not getting re-signed by Cincinnati, I know that. But I'm going to put him in Tennessee. Tennessee needs a good receiver. I think Tyler Boyd's reliable. He kind of fits that scheme of how Tennessee likes their receivers. He's a little bit older. Tennessee likes older receivers for some reasons. But I could also see him going to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh also has a system in which they need better, more reliable wide receivers. George Pickens and Deontay Johnson. I'm not a big fan of either one of them. George Pickens is kind of cool, but Deontay Johnson I just don't think is as good as people claim he is. I think Tyler Boyd fit well there. They don't desperately need a receiver, but I don't know. I could see him fitting that scheme. I really just couldn't see many other places. Again, it's kind of harder to rank these, not wide receiver, really bad wide receivers, but these like wide receiver 3 type receivers. It's a little bit more difficult. But with that said, DJ Chark kind of fits that same boat. I feel like he was one of the worst wide receiver 1s last year, even though he probably was wide receiver 2. Arguably after Adam Thielen, now that I think about it. But still, he's just kind of there. He's reliable. He's fine. It's a very Tyler Boyd type situation. It seems like somebody who'd fit well with the Patriots, but also feels like someone who'd fit well with the Chiefs. So I'm going Patriots number one choice here just because I feel like the Patriots have enough money to pay him, and he'd actually be pretty good with the Patriots, especially if they're losing Kendrick Bourne. Then you got the Chiefs, in which I think they need some more help at wide receiver, and I feel like J.J. Chark could just be a nice little add to the system. You got Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, and J.J. Chark would be a nice wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 kind of mix. I feel like they can make the system work and improve the receiving core. We'll see. We'll go with this as my the New England Patriots is my current choice. But we got Marquise Brown. And this one's also another hard one, just because I see the Cardinals kind of re-signing him, but I also see the Texans needing, probably another doable wide receiver. I think they're going to keep Nico Collins. I think they're going to keep Tank Dell. Obviously, they're going to keep both of those guys, I think. But I think both those guys are good enough receivers right now, but it doesn't hurt to ever look into a nice wide receiver 1, because I think Marquise Brown's very underrated, underappreciated. But at the same time, I'm almost 100% confident the Cardinals are going to re-sign him, keep him in some way. They like him there. They need to keep Kyler Murray supported, and I don't see them really getting anybody great unless they do Marvin Harrison in the draft. Even then, it's a big if. Beside the point, I think that the Cardinals re-sign Marquise Brown, and the Texans are a nice secondary choice, but I'm not putting too much stake in it either. Then we got Calvin Ridley, and listen, again, it's kind of going on a train. A lot of these receivers are probably staying in one location or another. I'm almost confident that he goes Jacksonville or stays in Jacksonville. They took a chance on him. I think they're going to pay him a decent amount of money. I think they need that type of receiver. I think him and Christian Kirk are a very underrated duo, and just need to get things sorted out on that team. The offense needs to get things sorted out. Trevor Lawrence needs to play healthy, and I think that team is going to be very, very scary. New York Jets, again, I'm going to put him in there just because I think Aaron Rodgers would love to throw it down to someone who's fast and speedy, especially with those deep routes. I just don't see a world where he leaves Jacksonville, to be honest with you. Then you got Michael Pittman, and again, we're kind of continuing a trend here. I think the Colts re-sign him. However, with that said, I think the Kansas City Chiefs, actually, this might be the most likely big signing, the Kansas City Chiefs, that no one's really talked about. People are talking about him getting, the Kansas City Chiefs getting Mike Evans, trading for Justin Jefferson is a little funny joke one. T. Higgins is a possibility I've seen, but I haven't seen people talk about Michael Pittman because it's pretty much a done said deal. I think that he's going to stay in Indianapolis. But I also think Kansas City is a very worthwhile place for him to at least consider, especially if they're interested. Michael Pittman is a very talented receiver, and would be an easy wide receiver 1 with Rashee Rice there right behind him, and Patrick Mahomes could finally have a more reliable receiving core. And yeah, he'd probably pay a little bit more money, but maybe not too much, maybe not as much as you think he would, especially with Michael Pittman Jr. probably hoping to get a ring. It's definitely a consideration at least. And I think the Kansas City Chiefs aren't the worst spot for him to go. And I was checking to make sure because I didn't know if I put another receiver on there. So there's a little hint to my defensive line players. Kind of talking about some of these other guys. McCole Hardman probably stays in Kansas City, but could go somewhere else. Kendrick Bourne, New England fits him pretty well. I think he wants to stay there, but he could also be an easy wide receiver somewhere else. Curtis Samuel, I really couldn't care. Jakeem Grant, who the hell was that even? Randall Cobb, probably go somewhere different. Matthew Slater probably retires. Fucking done. Then you got a couple other ones. Chase Claypool, who knows? Probably in free agency for a little bit, to be honest with you. I don't think anybody really wants to sign him. Otherwise, I don't see anybody too important. Honestly, I don't think the wide receiver market's really all too exciting. There's a lot of names that are interesting, but I think most of them re-sign. I think most of them are holding out for better contracts, but that's just my opinion. Also, I didn't know Odell Beckham is less than a year older than Mike Evans, which is kind of trippy considering Mike Evans is really, really good, while Odell Beckham had a really good spike. Beside the point, moving on to the defensive players now. All right, with the defensive players, you could kind of take these anywhere. There's defensive tackles, defensive ends, and that's pretty much it. I'll kind of talk about a little bit of each of the schemes and the different players that kind of feel like they fit in different areas. I kind of looked at the betting odds for this, just kind of get an idea, because this is probably the positions I have the least amount of knowledge for. But Leonard Williams, a solid guy, older, a little bit more of a veteran. I could see him going a couple different places, but I think the Seattle Seahawks definitely re-sign him. I think Seattle needs to keep that defense boosted. I think they want to keep it boosted. I think they like Leonard Williams as a more veteran talent. They like keeping more veteran players. Granted, they moved on from their coaching staff this season, so maybe they're just moving on from their players too. Who knows? I think they keep them around. But Tennessee Titans also sneaky good pick to maybe boost up their defense a little bit more. They really need to focus on the offensive line, but getting a defensive end like Leonard Williams would not be a bad acquisition for the Tennessee Titans and their struggling defense. I won't say it's a bad defense, it's a struggling defense. So I think Leonard Williams stays in Seattle, but Tennessee's another likely option, I think. Yeah, Chris Jones, hottest defensive free agent probably on the market, after the Kansas City's big win. I think he definitely moves on to Kansas City. I think he's ready to move on. I don't know where he could go, but I think two places I love to see him go: Houston Texans. I think they need a veteran piece on that defensive line, or the defensive side, however you want to say it. And I think Chris Jones would fit that perfectly with a younger defense that's ready and showing how capable they already are. Chris Jones would be a really good acquisition for that. Now, granted, I know it's a little splurgy, I think, for Texans, because I think they need to focus in other areas rather than defensive line. They can develop their defensive line as it goes and then get maybe another veteran piece that's not as expensive as Chris Jones. So that's why I'm putting the Chicago Bears as another great choice. I think the Chicago Bears defense has been amazing. It's getting a little bit weaker this year, but they bring in one more key piece again. It's going to be just as awesome again with Justin Fields or whoever comes in there, the number one pick. Who knows what they can do? Chris Jones would be a nice little pickup for them, especially if they have a little bit of money splash. Both these teams have a little bit of money splash, so I think that either one's are very possible. But I'm going with Houston to make the big acquisition. Now, with Chase Young, there's been struggles with him not performing amazingly. He's kind of diminished in last year especially. But I still think he's a hot free agent that anybody would love to have. I don't think the 49ers pick him up again just because of cap issues and stuff like that. So I can see him a couple different areas. I think Baltimore is number one. I think the defense they want to keep bolstered. And I think they're willing to take a chance on Chase Young, who might be not as expensive anymore because he just wasn't as good. Now, with the kind of other possibilities, I think Dolphins are very, very close second. I like the Dolphins here just because their defense has been spotty a little bit. Now, I'd say they probably need to move more in the secondary position, but I also think that their defensive line could use some help. And I think Chase Young putting some pass rush pressure on the quarterback. Holy crap, can't talk. Would be great for the defense of the Dolphins. With Atlanta also sneaky that they really need to kind of start acquiring other younger pieces on the defensive line. A lot of their pieces are getting older or moving on, so they need to start considering at least players like Chase Young in the free agent market, and are probably willing to take a shot at someone maybe who, again, Chase Young, whose stock has kind of diminished a little bit. Still think the Ravens pick him up, but Dolphins are a close second, and Atlanta's worth talking about. And finally, Christian Wilkins right here is another guy I want to talk about. I think he's very talented, but this is the reason why I'm not putting Dolphins at number one above Baltimore for like another big acquisition like Chase Young. And that's just because I think they're going to re-sign him. I think the Minnesota Vikings could possibly sign him for a little bit, but I just don't see him leaving Miami. Vikings are very nice choices. Again, they're willing to probably splash a little bit of money for the defense. They needed some help there. Christian Wilkins is a nice little pickup for them. So Minnesota is probably another likely option, I think, but I think Miami is pretty easy to sign him. And finally, I love Calais Campbell, but I put him at last because I love him so much. I think it's time. Question mark means I want them to retire. I think they need to retire. I think they are going to retire. I think Calais Campbell is ready. I think he has nothing more to offer many other teams. I honestly couldn't give you another team that would want to actively sign Calais Campbell. Maybe you could see him going to Atlanta. I don't know. It's a very hard pick here because Calais Campbell's been so good historically, but he's just kind of diminished over time. And I said go back to Atlanta, but he's in Atlanta. But you know what I mean. He's just an older talent. I think he's 38 now. I'm looking. 37. But he still got a lot of talent. But I also think he wants to go on top. Maybe he goes to someone like Kansas City. I don't know. But like a team that's ready to win now, maybe. But I doubt it. Looking at a lot of these other teams, and I just don't know these players enough. DJ Reader, I kind of know, but I couldn't tell you where he'd want to go. Romeo Okwara probably stays in Detroit if Detroit wants to keep him. Grover Stewart is somebody I considered putting on here, but he just didn't produce as much as I thought. Fletcher Cox as well. They aren't high-end talents that I think that I would want to talk about too much here. So I kind of just picked out the 5 big ones there. Kind of take the defensive tackles and defensive ends and kind of just place them intermediately throughout the teams I kind of mentioned, because all the teams kind of need some defensive pieces. But that's kind of my video. This is the end of the free agency predictions video or video series, but we'll kind of add some other things that are cool along the way. Thank you guys for watching. StraightA Dawson, out.